I thought I understood love. Turns out, I understood comfort, and those two things can look identical until you turn the lights on. Jonah here, and I am a facilities supervisor at a regional hospital network. I manage maintenance teams, fix emergency systems, work long shifts when heating fails at 3 in the morning. Blue-collar work that pays better than people assume, but I have never been the type to flash it. I bought my house 5 years ago, a modest 3-bedroom ranch in the suburbs with good bones and a yard that needed work. I fixed it up slowly, room by room, the way my dad taught me, every improvement paid for in cash, every dollar earned, every corner owned outright. When Alina moved in 14 months ago, I thought we were building something together. She was everything I wasn't, charming in ways that seemed effortless, the kind of person who could walk into a room and shift its energy. She worked as a lifestyle content coordinator for a small local magazine, did social media freelancing on the side. Her income was inconsistent, but she had this way of making instability look intentional, like she was choosing creativity over conventional success. I found it magnetic. We had been dating 2.5 years when she suggested moving in. It made sense on paper. She was spending most nights at my place anyway. Her apartment lease was ending, and I had the space. We had talked loosely about marriage, the way couples do when they are comfortable but not quite ready. Nothing formal, just a shared assumption that we were heading somewhere permanent. We had talked loosely about marriage, the way couples do when they are comfortable but not quite ready to commit. Nothing formal, just a shared assumption that we were heading somewhere permanent. I never added her to the mortgage, never even considered it. The house was mine before she arrived, and it seemed premature to tangle finances when we weren't married. She never brought it up either, which I took as her being low pressure, easygoing about traditional milestones. Looking back, her silence should have told me something. The moment everything shifted happened on a Saturday afternoon in late spring. I was hosting a backyard barbecue, nothing fancy, just neighbors and a few friends. The grill was smoking. Someone had brought too much potato salad, and the conversation had drifted to housing costs the way it always does. Marcus from down the street made a joke. He looked at Alina and said, "Must be nice, not worrying about rent anymore." Everyone chuckled. The kind of lightweight teasing that happens over beer and burgers. Alina laughed too, easy and natural. Then she said it, honestly. Moving in with Jonah fixed like 90% of my problems. The group laughed louder. I laughed too, because what else do you do? But something caught in my throat. The phrasing, not our life together, not us building something. My problems fixed. The conversation moved on, the sun set orange and warm, and everyone went home full and happy. But that sentence stayed with me. It sat in my chest like a stone I couldn't cough up over the next few months. Patterns started emerging that I had been too comfortable to notice before. Alina's financial contribution to the household began shrinking. At first, it was gradual. She would mention a slow month for freelance work, a client who hadn't paid yet, creative burnout making it hard to focus. She framed everything as temporary, just needing time to regroup. I didn't push. She was stressed, and I didn't want to be the kind of partner who made money a source of tension, but the temporary stretched longer. Then the language shifted. "You own the house anyway," she would say when I brought up splitting utilities. "You would be paying this whether I am here or not," when I mentioned the mortgage. Small phrases, delivered casually, but they all pointed the same direction. My expenses were mine, hers were negotiable. She started talking about quitting her job entirely, taking a few months to reset. When I suggested we create a shared monthly budget, her reaction caught me off guard. She went quiet first, that dangerous kind of quiet where you know an emotional reaction is loading. Then she said I was being transactional, that keeping score in a relationship made her feel unsafe. That love wasn't supposed to have spreadsheets attached. I backed off. I didn't want to be the bad guy, but the unease didn't leave. It grew. I started noticing smaller things. The way she had leave her laptop open with articles about tenant rights visible on the screen. The vague questions she would ask about protections for long-term partners, framed as curiosity about a friend's situation. The social media posts she had saved about financial security and cohabitation, about what women deserve when they invest emotional labor in relationships. Screenshots saved to a folder she thought I had never see. She avoided anything concrete, no written agreements about expenses, No conversations about putting money toward shared assets. No clear timelines for anything. Just vague references to eventually and someday. And when we are ready, every attempt at structure met with emotional resistance. I started to wonder if I was paranoid, if my working-class upbringing had made me too rigid about money, too suspicious of people who approached finances differently. If I was letting fear sabotage something good, letting past experiences with my parents' money struggles color how I saw my own relationship. Then her laptop broke, or she thought it broke. She asked me to look at it. Something about the screen flickering. I am not a tech guy, but I know enough to check connections. I opened it up to test the display, and there it was. A Slack group chat. Still logged in. Conversation thread open. The group was called Soft Life Era. I should have closed it immediately, but the preview message was visible, and my name was in it. Once you see your name in a private conversation, you cannot unsee it. I read. They were joking about upgrading lifestyles without upgrading workload. One message from Alina made my stomach drop. Worst case, I leave with savings. Best case, I never pay rent again. Another one, from a week earlier. The trick is staying long enough to establish rights without actually signing anything legal. The discussion went on. Strategies about letting partners carry fixed costs while building personal savings. About avoiding documentation. About positioning yourself as emotionally invested while keeping financial options open. The tone wasn't sarcastic. It wasn't venting. It was tactical. I took photos of the screen with my phone. My hands were shaking. The laptop screen was fine. By the way, just a loose cable connection. I didn't confront her immediately. I needed to think. I went for a long drive, the kind where you don't have a destination. You just move because staying still feels impossible. The city lights blurred past, and I tried to reframe what I would read. Maybe it was exaggerated venting. Maybe the group chat was just performative cynicism, the way people joke about things they don't actually mean. But the details were too specific, the language too calculated, the consistency too deliberate. That night, I tested her. I kept my voice calm, almost hypothetical. Hey, random question. If I decided to sell this house and we rented an apartment together, would you still want to live with me? She froze. Her wine glass stopped halfway to her mouth. The air in the room changed, went dense and uncomfortable. Why would you ask that? Just curious. Hypothetically, are you threatening me? No, I am asking a question. Her face shifted through several expressions. Confusion, then anger, then something that looked like panic. You are testing me, she said, her voice tight. You are literally threatening my security to see how I react. That is emotional manipulation, Jonah. I am asking if you would want to be with me without the house. You are pulling the rug out. You are making me feel unsafe in my own home. It is not your home. The words came out colder than I meant them, but they were true. She stared at me. I stared back. The silence stretched until it became its own answer. She never actually answered the question. I waited 2 days. I needed to be sure. I reread the messages. I considered every alternative explanation. I even asked myself if I was being controlling, if my fear of being used had twisted something innocent into something sinister. But the math didn't lie. She had been living rent-free for over a year. Her savings had grown while mine stayed flat. Every time I suggested shared responsibility, she had reacted with emotional deflection. And that Slack group wasn't a joke. Those women were coaching each other. On the 3rd day, I sat her down. I waited until evening, when the house was quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator. I saw your messages, I said. My voice came out steadier than I felt. The group chat. Her face went white first, all the color draining. Then red, flooding back with heat and panic. You went through my computer. It was open. You asked me to fix it. Her voice climbed an octave. Were they private, or were they about me? She stood up, pacing the living room in that agitated way people move when they are trying to create distance but have nowhere to go. Those messages were exaggerated. We were venting. Everyone complains about their partners with friends. Everyone needs a space to vent without being judged for it. You weren't complaining, you were strategizing. That is not fair. You are taking things out of context. You are weaponizing my private conversations against me. What context makes best case I never pay rent again? Okay, She opened her mouth, closed it. Her eyes went glassy with tears. Answer the question from the other night, I pressed. If I didn't own this house, would you still be here? She opened her mouth again. No sound came out at first. Then her face crumpled. You are twisting everything. I gave up my apartment for you. I rearranged my entire life, gave up my independence, made myself vulnerable to you. You stopped paying rent and called it love. That is cruel, Jonah. That is actually cruel. It is true. The argument spiraled from there. She cried, real tears streaming down her face, makeup smearing. She accused me of financial abuse, said she had invested emotional labor that couldn't be measured in dollars, couldn't be quantified on a spreadsheet. The cooking, the cleaning, the emotional support during my long shifts. Being there when I needed someone. She said the messages were taken out of context, that I was betraying her trust by reading them, that privacy in a relationship was sacred and I had violated that. Then the narrative shifted. She said she had sacrificed career opportunities to be with me, turned down a job offer in another city because I had asked her to stay, that I was controlling, that she should have seen the red flags earlier, that her friends had warned her about men who used financial power as leverage. I let her talk until she ran out of words. Then I said the only thing that mattered. I want a partner, not a dependent. And I don't think you want a partner either. I think you want security without responsibility. She stared at me, breathing hard. You have 30 days to move out. The breakdown was immediate and total. She sobbed, the kind of crying that sounds like it is being torn out of your chest. She begged for another chance, promised things would change, said we could go to therapy, that she would get a full-time job, that she had signed whatever I wanted. But the promises were vague. She would work on it. She would be better. We would figure it out. Just give her time. But she never once offered to split costs equally going forward. She never suggested a written agreement with actual numbers. She never addressed the actual issue. She just wanted more time in the house. I didn't bend. The 30 days were brutal. She stayed in the guest room, and the house felt like a museum of a relationship that had already died. She tried different approaches. Anger, where she had slammed doors and mutter about my coldness. Sadness, where she would cry softly in the kitchen. Negotiation, where she would suggest couples therapy and mediation. None of it touched me. The messages had shown me the architecture beneath the surface. Once you see the blueprint, you cannot pretend the building is something else. She moved in with 2 roommates on the other side of town. I helped carry boxes to her car. The entire process was silent and efficient, like disassembling furniture you never planned to rebuild. After she left, she posted vague stories on social media, things about emotional neglect and financial pressure. She never mentioned specifics, never said my name, but the implication was clear. I was the villain in her narrative. Some of her friends reached out, asking what happened. A few saw the screenshots I had saved. The narrative started to crack. The story was harder to sell when people saw the actual words. Her online engagement dropped. The lifestyle content she posted started looking hollow when people knew she was splitting rent. 3 ways and working full-time retail to cover basics. The soft life era ended quietly, without announcement. I didn't follow her accounts. I didn't need to track her decline or feel vindicated. That wasn't the point. I stayed in my house. The silence felt different now, not lonely but clean, like air after a storm clears. I replanted the garden she had never cared about, pulled out the high-maintenance decorative plants she had insisted on and put in native species that would thrive without constant attention. Fixed the guest room, painted over the marks on the walls. The room stopped being a reminder and became just a room again. I invited friends over without worrying about maintaining an image. Just people, food, conversation. Months later, I started dating again. Cautiously, the way you do after learning that comfort and love aren't synonyms. I was more careful now, more attentive to patterns, more willing to ask direct questions. I met someone at a hospital fundraiser, a trauma nurse, mid-30s, with the kind of direct manner people develop when they have seen enough emergencies that pretense feels like wasted time. We talked by the buffet table about the hospital's new pediatric wing, then about everything else. She made eye contact that felt rare, like she was actually present. We went for coffee a few days later. The conversation turned to logistics. I mentioned owning my house. She nodded. I rent right now. Small place downtown, closer to the hospital. But I cover my half of everything, always have. That sentence hit harder than I expected. Not because it was profound, but because it was simple. Clear. No subtext, no strategy, no testing, just baseline partnership. I split rent with a roommate, she continued. We Venmo each other for utilities and groceries. It is not complicated. You use resources. You pay for them. We have been seeing each other for 4 months now. It is too early to call it serious, but it is different. When we talk about potentially moving in together someday, she uses we without hesitation, but she also talks about splitting costs and maintaining separate savings and keeping things documented. Not because she doesn't trust me, but because clarity is how she operates. When bills come up, she doesn't flinch. We alternate picking up tabs. She bought concert tickets. I paid for the hotel. It flows naturally because we both assume equality as the default state. She asked about my last relationship once. We were driving back from hiking, and the question came out casual. I gave her the short version. She wanted security without responsibility. The nurse was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "You cannot build a life with someone who is just looking for shelter." I think about Alina sometimes. Not with anger, not anymore. Anger is exhausting, and she is not worth sustained emotional energy. Mostly, I think about how close I came to mistaking her fear of independence for commitment. How easily I had confused her need for my resources with her need for me as a person. How comfortable I had gotten in a dynamic that was slowly draining me in ways I didn't recognize until I saw the pattern spelled out. Living together didn't expose her character. It exposed the version of partnership she believed in. She wanted the benefits of marriage without the vulnerability of mutual investment. She wanted to be taken care of while calling it equality. Wanted support while framing contribution as controlling. It was a worldview consistent and thought through, not an accident. I wanted someone who would stand next to me, not behind me waiting for cover. Someone who would build something together, not move into something already built. Someone who saw partnership as shared risk and shared reward. We were never building the same thing. We were just living in the same house, speaking different languages, calling it love, because we hadn't learned that love requires more than cohabitation. It requires alignment. It requires both people pulling weight. It requires someone willing to stand on their own so they can choose to stand with you. I didn't lose a future with her. I avoided a long, expensive lesson about the difference between a partner and a passenger, between someone who wants to share your life and someone who wants to use your life as infrastructure for theirs. My house is still modest, still well kept, still mine. But now when someone's here, they are here because they want to be, not because they need to be, because they chose this specific person in this specific place. Not because they chose the convenience of not paying rent while maintaining the appearance of